Emily Carter lay motionless in the stillness of her apartment, her eyes fixed on the ceiling as if waiting for an answer from the darkness. It was 5 o'clock a.m., another night without sleep. At 26, armed with a degree in administrative assistance, she at once believed she'd chosen the right path. A stable, low-risk career her parents had reassured her would secure her future. But now, 3 months into unemployment, those reassurances felt hollow, even bitter. Rejection emails piled up in her inbox, 37 so far, each one chipped away at her confidence, each one silently echoing the same brutal conclusion. You're not good enough. On her nightstand sat a small photograph, gently illuminated by the soft blue glow of her phone. It was from her college graduation, Emily in her cap and gown, flanked by her smiling parents. You made the practical choice, her father had told her when she chose administrative work over pursuing her childhood dream of becoming an artist. Now she remembered those words while compulsively refreshing her email, her movements more reflex than hope. Just one more application, she whispered, like a child making a wish in the dark. The glow of her screen spilled across the cramped walls of her studio apartment, revealing framed sketches from her childhood, remnants of a dream that once set her soul on fire. Her favorite piece hung beside her desk, a watercolor of a young girl standing at the edge of a shadowed forest, lantern in hand. She'd titled it, Courage, at age 12. Now, the word struck her as ironic. It mocked her. Once upon a time, she had dared to believe she could forge her own way, but now she was simply drifting. A text from Rachel, her roommate, lit up the screen. Any luck today? Emily didn't respond. She knew Rachel was trying to help. She had even offered to cover Emily's share of next month's rent. But Emily couldn't accept. It wasn't pride exactly, but something deeper. The fear that if she accepted help too easily, she'd slowly lose herself altogether. Outside her window, New Jersey stretched beneath a blanket of morning haze. A city that never slept, where ambition moved fast and people moved faster. Emily had always felt out of place in that rhythm, too quiet for networking, too thoughtful for corporate pace, too introspective for the relentless performance modern careers demanded. At business events, she stood off to the side, nursing a glass of sparkling water like a shield. While others networked and exchanged buzzwords and business cards, she listened, observed, and waited, often for nothing. Her tired eyes scanned job listings, each one blurring into the next. Then one caught her attention. Administrative Assistant, Floor 3, Westbridge Holdings. It seemed ideal. Her field, her skill set, and a name she recognized. With a fragile flicker of hope, she uploaded her resume and hit send. But when she double-checked moments later, her stomach dropped. She had misread the drop-down menu. She hadn't applied for the third-floor administrative pool. She had submitted her application to the CEO's executive suite on the 30th floor, an elite assistant role meant for candidates far more qualified. Her heart pounded. No undo button, no way to withdraw. The next morning, her phone rang. "Good morning, Miss Carter. This is Jessica Wong from Westbridge Holdings. Mr. Cross would like to meet with you at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow." Emily froze. William Cross. The name carried weight across New Jersey's financial world. At only 38, he had transformed Westbridge Holdings from a struggling investment firm into a financial titan. The business press dubbed him the Glacier. Sharp, analytical, unrelenting. His reputation was legendary, brilliant, cold, and demanding near superhuman precision from his team. Assistants came and went, rarely lasting more than a few months. And now Emily Carter, who had never even stepped foot on a corporate executive floor, was scheduled to interview with one of the most powerful men in the industry for a job she wasn't remotely qualified for. The Westbridge Tower loomed over the financial district, a spear of glass and steel piercing the sky. In the mirrored reflection of the elevator doors, Emily barely recognized herself, a young woman trying hard to look professional. The navy blazer was borrowed, her hair pulled tight, her hands clutched around a slim portfolio. But her eyes gave her away, anxious, overwhelmed, on the edge. The elevator opened to a pristine minimalist lobby, as quiet as it was intimidating. A receptionist, poised and polished, looked up without surprise. "Miss Carter, Mr. Cross is expecting you." Emily followed the sound of her own footsteps down a long, glass-lined hallway that felt more like a runway. The corner office, where the interview would take place, had floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to a panoramic view of the city. She had never seen New Jersey from this angle. From up here, the city looked still, like a model, frozen in time. But within these walls, everything pulsed with high-stakes energy. William Cross stood with his back to her, perfectly upright, dressed in a suit so well-tailored it looked like armor. "Please, have a seat, Miss Carter," he said without turning around. His voice was clipped, commanding. Emily sat gingerly on the edge of the chair, her heartbeat thudding in her chest. When he finally turned, she saw what the articles meant. Tall, composed, his features sharp and refined, with just a hint of gray at the temples that made him look even more severe. But it was his eyes, piercing ocean blue, that gave her pause. They didn't just see you, they measured you. "My executive assistant quit yesterday, no notice. I have back-to-back meetings next week, Tokyo, then Dubai. HR says a permanent replacement will take a month." He glanced at her resume. "You've worked administrative roles, but not at this level." Emily opened her mouth, about to explain the application was a mistake, but William cut in again. "I need someone, immediately, 2 weeks, possibly 3. You'll manage my calendar, prepare briefing materials, handle sensitive correspondence. The hours are long, the work is demanding. You'll be expected to anticipate my needs before I articulate them." Then he checked his watch. "Can you start today?" Emily's mind spun. She needed the money, desperately. This job, even temporary, paid 3 times more than her library position. But this office, this man, this world, it was suffocating. "I actually meant to apply for—" William cut her off again. "I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. Your answer—" Swallowed hard. "Yes, I can start today." "Good. Jessica will handle the paperwork and show you to your desk." William left the room without another word. Emily sat in stunned silence. She had just stepped through the wrong door and into a world she never believed would let her in. That first week was chaos. Every day felt like a test she wasn't ready for. She arrived before 7:00 a.m. and often didn't leave until after 8:00 p.m. She reorganized William's chaotic calendar, prepared complex briefs, fielded calls she barely understood, and slowly, clumsily began to understand how Westbridge operated, with ruthless precision. On her very first morning, she discovered that William expected his coffee exactly 14 minutes before each meeting. Not 15, not 13. The temperature had to be perfect. Half a teaspoon of sugar, exactly. His calendar had to be color-coded by priority. Briefing documents, ordered by project phase, with the most crucial sections highlighted in blue, never yellow, never orange. "Details are everything here, Miss Carter," he said one afternoon when she accidentally alphabetized files rather than organizing by development stage. "If you can't manage the small things, this may not be the right place for you." She wasn't good at the job, at least not in the beginning. She spilled coffee on day 2, double-booked meetings on day 3, nearly emailed sensitive data to the wrong contact on day 4. Each evening she went home and cried, convinced the next day would be her last. But she paid attention, she listened, and in the silence, Emily Carter began to uncover a strength no one, least of all herself, had ever expected. She wasn't good at this job, at least not at first. On her second day, she spilled coffee, On the third, she scheduled 2 meetings at the same time. On the fourth, she nearly sent confidential files to the wrong recipient. Every night she collapsed onto her bed in tears, convinced the next day would be her last at Westbridge. But Emily was meticulous. She learned quickly, and most importantly, she listened. Really listened. By day 5, she began noticing things that others missed. The marketing director twisted his wedding ring whenever he bent the truth. The CFO's assistant couldn't meet the legal team's gaze. The head of acquisitions raised her voice just slightly when her proposals were weak. She started recording everything in a small notebook, not out of strategy, but because observation was how she'd always made sense of the world. Emily was never the one talking, but she had always been the one hearing what wasn't being said. William Cross was the hardest to read. He moved through the office like a storm bottled up, focused, intense, self-contained, and around him people became louder, more performative, as if proximity to power triggered a primal instinct to be noticed. Emily, as usual, did the opposite. She remained quiet, efficient, almost invisible. She kept his office organized to perfection, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, and steered clear of the political undercurrents that swirled through the building. One evening, long after most had gone home, Emily left a stack of reports on William's desk. He looked up, surprised to see anyone still there. The last rays of sunset filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden and amber shadows across the room. "You don't say much," he observed, his piercing eyes settling on her. Emily smoothed the front of her skirt, still uncomfortable with his direct attention. "I only speak when I have something worth saying, sir." William gave a slow nod, as if hearing something rare and valuable. He glanced at the documents. "You arrange these by risk assessment rather than projected returns." Emily tensed. "I thought it might be more useful for tomorrow's meeting." William flipped through the pages, scanning them silently. "It is." She hesitated, taking a step back. "If you'd like, I can rearrange them." "No," he cut her off, his expression shifting. Something curious flickering in his gaze. "How did you know I needed this format?" "Yesterday, when you were on the phone with Mr. Donovan, you emphasized evaluating risk factors first." William paused for a beat, then nodded again, this time slower. "Exactly what I needed." The following Monday, William exited a tense leadership meeting, his shoulders tight, jaw clenched. When Emily knocked, he waved her in without looking up. "Close the door." She stepped in, notebook in hand, waiting. "What did you take from that meeting?" he asked. Emily hesitated. "Sir, I was only observing." "You weren't just listening to the content, you were reading the people." She shifted uneasily. "I noticed a few things." "Tell me what you noticed." Emily drew a breath. Mr. Donovan was defensive when discussing the Robinson acquisition, but not because of the numbers. Her voice faltered for a second, but then steadied. He kept bringing up being left out of conversations. That's not like him. Last week he opposed Ms. Patel's position, but today she supported him. And they arrived together this morning, with coffee from that little café across town, not the one in our building. For a man known for his impenetrable composure, William Cross's expression shifted, just slightly. "Go on." Mr. Abonati checked his phone 18 times, always right after Mr. Richards spoke. They're communicating about something they don't want discussed publicly. Emily paused. Her hands gripped the edge of her notebook. "And you already knew the Robinson numbers wouldn't match projections. You were just watching to see who would admit it first." William leaned back in his chair, studying her more carefully now, no longer just his assistant, but something more. "How long have you been observing people like this?" "All my life," she said, voice low but sure. "When you don't talk much, you start to notice more." From that moment, her role changed. Emily was no longer just an assistant. She began sitting in on executive meetings, not to speak but to observe. Afterward, when the room was quiet again, she and William would sit alone. She'd share what others didn't catch: shifting alliances, concealed frustrations, and unspoken motivations behind the polished words. William never explained why he valued her insights so deeply, but the temporary assignment quietly stretched from 2 weeks to 1 month, then 2. HR continued to submit candidates for the executive assistant role, but William dismissed them all without consideration. In his world of relentless pressure and sharp edges, Emily's quiet perception became a silent superpower. One rainy evening, as Emily packed up to leave, William called her into his office. The room was dim, lit only by his desk lamp and the soft glow of the city beyond the windows. "Sit," he said, not with command, but with something gentler, an invitation. On his desk sat a bottle of scotch and 2 glasses. "I'm not going to finish those quarterly projections tonight," he admitted, pushing 1 glass toward her. "Instead, tell me something." Emily blinked. "About what, sir?" "Your art. Your resume mentioned a background in illustration before administrative work." She was startled. She hadn't realized he remembered that. "I always found it easier to express myself through images than words," she answered carefully. "As a kid, I used to draw stories I couldn't say out loud." William nodded slowly. "And why did you stop?" The question caught her off guard. It was more personal than anything they'd ever discussed. "Practicality," she said honestly. "My parents were worried about financial stability. Office work seemed safer." "Did it give you that stability?" Emily thought of her 3 jobless months, the sleepless nights, the quiet tears in her tiny apartment. "Not really." And with that, a new conversation began, one that would change not just the trajectory of her career, but the heartbeat of the company itself. William slowly swirled his glass of scotch, his eyes drifting to the rain-streaked window. "Do you know why I value your observations, Emily?" It was the first time he called her by name. Not Miss Carter. Not Miss Carter. Just Emily. "Everyone here says what they think I want to hear," he continued. "They compete for attention, desperate to impress. But it's all noise. You don't try to impress me, you just see the truth." He paused, the silence hanging heavy. "I wasn't always like this. 8 years ago, I trusted the wrong people. I made decisions based on relationships, not data, and I nearly destroyed this company. When I rebuilt it, I swore I would never let emotion cloud my judgment again." He turned to her, the intensity in his gaze softening. "But when you remove emotion entirely, you also lose connection to what really matters." From that night on, their late-night conversations became routine. In the quiet stillness of the office, William began to open up. To the pressure of leadership, the loneliness of command, the constant need to project certainty even when he was filled with doubt. And Emily, once just a quiet shadow on the edge of the room, began to share her own insights, observations, and truths that others were too afraid or too unaware to say aloud. One evening, she offered a quiet truth that would ripple through the company. The research team doesn't need a bigger budget. They need to be seen. They've had 3 major breakthroughs this quarter, and you've never once visited their floor. William frowned. "That's Davis's responsibility." "With all due respect, sir," she said gently, "your presence carries a different weight." The next day, William spent a full hour on the research floor. Within a week, productivity shot up by 20%. 3 months after what was supposed to be a 2-week fill-in, Emily's title was officially changed to Executive Strategic Advisor, a role created just for her. Her salary tripled. But more than that, her quiet voice had become something irreplaceable. She began joining William in high-stakes client meetings, not to speak, but to listen, to notice. Afterward, she would quietly decode unspoken concerns, subtle hesitations, things no pitch deck could ever reveal. One evening, following a tense negotiation with a cautious investor from Singapore, William poured 2 glasses of scotch, a rare light in his eyes. "You just saved a $40 million deal," he said, handing her a glass. Emily looked down, modest. "I just noticed. Every time you mentioned the 5-year projections, he touched his wedding band. He wasn't worried about returns. He was worried about long-term stability." "No one else picked up on that," William said, voice firm. "Not me, not my entire team." He studied her carefully. "It's like you have emotional sonar. You pick up what's beneath the surface." Emily smiled faintly. "I think it's simpler than that. I'm just not blinded by titles or power. I see people as people." William turned to her, something unfamiliar stirring in his eyes. "And how do you see me?" The question floated in the air between them, charged with a vulnerability rare for a man so known for his composure. Emmeline inhaled slowly. She thought about the man she'd met on day 1, rigid, cold, unreadable, and the one she'd come to know in these quiet evenings. A strategic mastermind who forgot to eat lunch, a numbers genius who struggled to navigate emotions, a leader who carried the weight of every decision, often alone. "I see someone who built walls to protect what he values," she said softly. "But walls don't just keep danger out. They keep connection out too." William flinched, just slightly. For a fleeting second, his face revealed something raw and human before the mask returned. He turned back to the window. He didn't speak. For the first time since she joined the company, William Cross had no words. Autumn melted into winter. Emily had now been at Westbridge for nearly 6 months when the whispers began. Rumors of a buyout. Meridian Global, an international giant known for aggressive acquisitions and brutal cost-cutting, had made a bid well above Westbridge's market value. The executive floor buzzed with excitement. Board members calculated stock options and scanned listings for homes in Aspen. Department heads began rehearsing speeches about strategic alignment. But downstairs, the tone was different. In the cafeteria, employees whispered, their eyes wary. The IT department stayed late backing up personal files, and the maintenance crew, usually invisible, exchanged knowing glances. They'd lived through takeovers before. They knew what efficiency usually meant: layoffs. William remained composed on the surface, but Emily saw it, in the tightness of his jaw, in how long he lingered outside the research floor, watching the team laugh over code and coffee, like a father looking at something he built, something he was about to lose. "Meridian doesn't want our people," he told her one night, voice heavy. "They want our client list and market position. Within a year, half the staff will be gone." Emily looked at him. "And what about you?" William stared out at the night. "I've spent 8 years rebuilding this company, a place of integrity, but my responsibility is to the shareholders, not sentiment." Emily said nothing. She saw the war inside him, the clash between logic and legacy. She knew the decision was already made, and that was what broke her heart. That night, after William left, Emily couldn't bring herself to leave the office. Not because there was work to do, but because her heart wouldn't let her walk away. She wandered the silent halls of Westbridge, fingertips grazing the walls. In the research wing, empty coffee cups sat beside notebooks brimming with unrealized potential. In the marketing department, a wall of photos documented holiday parties, charity drives, team retreats, smiling faces of people who didn't yet know their futures were being sold. She stopped at a framed photograph by the elevator. William, 8 years younger, cutting the ribbon at Westbridge's grand opening. He looked so different, more than youthful. He looked hopeful. His eyes weren't just sharp with ambition, they were lit with belief. Belief in what he was building. 2 days later, William held a company-wide meeting to announce the acquisition. Champagne was chilled, press releases drafted. Meridian executives were en route to finalize the deal. Emily's stock options, once worthless, would soon be enough to cover rent for the year. She should have felt relief. But all she felt was hollow. In the grand atrium of Westbridge, Emily stood quietly at the back, half shadowed by the marble columns as the room buzzed with anticipation. William stepped onto the stage, his face composed, his posture calm and authoritative. The same face he wore for investors, boards, and headlines. But Emily noticed what others missed. His shoulders were too stiff. His jaw clenched just slightly at the edge, the corners of his eyes tight. He was holding himself together, barely. "Thank you all for being here today," William began, voice steady. "As many of you have heard, Westbridge Holdings has received an acquisition offer from Meridian Global." He continued, laying out the financial rationale. Strategic realignment, market share, increased capital flexibility. But something inside Emily shifted. This wasn't the man who had listened to her on rainy nights in his office. This wasn't the leader who walked the research floor instead of hiding behind a spreadsheet. This was surrender. Without planning, without permission, Emily began to move. Her heartbeat thundered. Her legs shook beneath her. She, who always chose invisibility, now found herself pulled forward by something stronger than fear. A voice inside her she had silenced for too long. She raised her hand. It was such a small gesture, but it was enough. William paused, caught mid-sentence. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily Carter, the silent assistant, the shadow in meetings, was stepping into the light. William blinked, startled. "Emily, do you have something you'd like to share?" Hundreds of heads turned. Her throat tightened. Her palms were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at her to sit down, apologize. But she remembered the photograph of William cutting the ribbon. She remembered the half-drunk coffee cups in the research wing. The worried glances from the janitorial staff. William's quiet words in the rain, "I built this on faith." With trembling fingers, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her small, worn notebook, the one she'd carried since day 3. The pages were creased, the ink faded, stained with quiet observations nobody had ever asked for. "On my 3rd day here," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I wrote something to myself." She opened to a page. "Westbridge isn't just a company," she read. "It's Mark from security who walks elderly clients to their cars when it rains. It's the development team that once slept on the floor when the system crashed. It's the cleaning lady who remembers everyone's birthday." The room fell still. It's the research team working to expand financial access for thousands. It's the community program that's helped over 200 students get an education. Emily looked up, locking eyes with William. "We're not just a portfolio or a market position. We're people who built something meaningful together." She closed the notebook, hands shaking. "I'm sorry for interrupting, but before we sell what we've built, someone needed to remember why we built it." And with that, she turned and walked through the stunned silence. Every step felt like a farewell. She left the building, packed her things, and spent the night staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, wondering how long it would take to find another job. At 6 a.m., her phone rang. "William, come to the office now." Emily entered his office expecting to be dismissed, but instead she found him standing tall, his energy crackling like a man who had just remembered how to breathe. "I canceled the Meridian deal." She blinked. "You? What?" "I called their CEO at midnight, withdrew from negotiations." A rare smile flickered at the edge of his mouth. The board is furious. Stock's going to take a dive this morning. He shrugged. It'll recover. But why? She asked. Because you were right, William said, pacing. I built Westbridge to be different, to create something that meant more than just quarterly earnings. Somewhere along the line, I forgot that. He stopped and looked directly at her. You reminded me. Emily could barely process the words. The board's going to fight this, she warned. Let 'em, he replied, unfazed. I still hold controlling interest. He sat on the edge of his desk, more human than ever. But I'll need help, someone to convince them we can build something better without selling out. He handed her a folder. A new position. Director of Internal Culture and Human Capital. You'll report directly to me and represent every voice in this company in our decisions. Emily opened the document and blinked at the salary. It was more than she had dared imagine. You want me to be the voice of your people? William's gaze softened. You already were, when it mattered most. You see what others overlook. You understand what people need to grow. That's rare, Emily. You don't need an MBA to know how to listen. He smiled. You applied to the wrong job and ended up exactly where you belong. That afternoon, William sent an email to the entire company. Yesterday, I was reminded that Westbridge's true value isn't found on a balance sheet. I have declined Meridian's acquisition offer because our future as an independent company holds greater potential, not just financially, but as a community built on shared purpose. To ensure we stay grounded in that purpose, I've appointed Emily Carter as our new Director of Internal Culture and Human Capital. You may not have met Emily. She prefers listening over speaking, but for months she has been my most trusted advisor. Her insight into what makes Westbridge special will help guide us forward. I once believed emotion and business should stay separate. I was wrong. Our strength lies in the balance between clear eyes, strategy, and genuine human connection. Sometimes the wrong door leads us exactly where we're meant to be. 6 months later, Westbridge was being studied in business schools across the country. Their stock not only rebounded, it shattered previous records. Employee retention reached all-time highs. The research team released 2 breakthrough fintech tools. The marketing department won awards for their authenticity-driven campaigns, and the maintenance staff now received executive-level health benefits and paid family leave. Emily, still soft-spoken, had become one of the most respected voices in the company. She implemented monthly open forums where every employee could speak directly with leadership. She introduced human impact assessments for all major initiatives, and she created a mentorship program connecting executives with entry-level employees. Tearing down the invisible walls that had once defined Westbridge's culture, William, once known as the financial iceberg, was now featured in Forbes for his revolutionary leadership philosophy, one that placed people and profit on equal footing. The real innovation at Westbridge, he often told journalists, began when I started listening to the quietest voice in the room. In her new office, smaller than William's by her request, Emily kept 2 notebooks side by side. One, still full of meticulous observations, the other, a sketchbook. She had started drawing again, capturing the stories behind the numbers. The receptionist who remembered everyone's coffee, the janitor who left handwritten encouragements on desks, the IT technician who brought his guitar during overnight maintenance shifts. One evening, William stopped by. Another late night? He asked. Emily smiled. Just finishing something. She turned her sketchpad toward him. 2 figures stood at a crossroads, one tall and commanding, the other small, steady, grounded. Both faced forward. What's it called? William asked. She paused. The wrong door, or maybe the right place. Then she looked up and added, gently, Sometimes our greatest strengths are hidden in the things the world once called weaknesses. A year to the day after her promotion, William hosted a quiet celebration in his office. No fanfare, just coffee, soft light, and people who once doubted her now standing around a table, eager to share ideas about workplace culture, as if they'd believed in it all along. Emily stood near the window, as she always did, watching, quietly observing. She didn't need to be at the center to feel the shift. William came to stand beside her, his shoulders more relaxed than she'd ever seen. "I've always meant to ask you something," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "That day, when you stood up and spoke, what gave you the courage?" Emily was silent, but this time, only so she could truly feel the question. "I think," Emily began, her voice calm and steady now, "I realized that just because you speak softly doesn't mean what you have to say isn't important." She offered a gentle smile, and her eyes flickered with a glint of something distant, something remembered. "My mother used to tell me when I was a little girl, sometimes the world doesn't need another person shouting, it needs someone brave enough to whisper the truth." William nodded, his gaze turning thoughtful, deeper. "Well, your whisper changed an entire company." Outside the window, New Jersey stretched beneath them, still buzzing, still sharp-edged, still unapologetically loud. The same city that once made Emily feel small, misplaced, invisible. But not anymore. Now when she looked out, she didn't see competition and noise. She saw stories, people, lives unfolding quietly behind glass towers and crowded subway cars. A skyline of quiet hopes and silent resilience, waiting to be heard. Emily, the shy girl who once applied for the wrong job, had learned that being true to herself, even if that self was different, quiet and unsure, was exactly what the world needed. And William, the man who had once walled himself off in numbers and logic, had come to understand that the strongest companies aren't built on spreadsheets or market dominance. They are built on the hearts of the people who believe in what they're creating. Maybe there are no wrong doors, only unexpected journeys that lead us to where we were always meant to be. And maybe the most powerful voice isn't the loudest in the room, but the one that speaks truth precisely when it matters most. Thank you for walking with us through Emily's remarkable journey, from mistaken applicant to transformative leader. Her story reminds us that what we once saw as weaknesses, quietness, sensitivity, observation, can become our greatest superpowers when we have the courage to embrace who we truly are. If Emily's journey resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we honor the strength that lives in silence and the truth that waits patiently inside the quietest of hearts. And if you've ever walked through a door you thought was a mistake, only to find yourself exactly where you needed to be, share your story in the comments. You never know, it might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Because sometimes, strength isn't in how loud we speak, but in having the courage to speak the truth, right when it matters most.